Imani Chisomo was only 11 years old when her whole world fell apart. Her mother passed away after a short illness, leaving a silence in the small family home in Lilongwe, Malawi that never seemed to go away. Every corner of the house reminded Imani of her mom's warm smile, bedtime stories and gentle hugs. Her father, Elias Chisomo, loved his daughter, but he buried himself in work to escape his own grief. Most days, Imani cried alone, wishing her mother would walk through the front door one more time. A few months later, Elias introduced Regina Bonda as his new wife. Regina smiled kindly, bought Imani a new school bag, braided her hair, and told everyone she would love her like her own daughter. For a little while, Imani believed her. She thought maybe life was finally getting better. But the kindness slowly disappeared. Regina stopped asking for help and started giving orders. First, it was washing the dishes after dinner. Then it became cooking breakfast before school, cleaning every room, doing the laundry and scrubbing the floors. Every afternoon, while other children played outside, Imani hurried home because she knew Regina would be waiting with another list of chores. No matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Regina always found another reason to criticize her. At just 11 years old, Imani wasn't treated like a daughter anymore. She was treated like the family's maid, and no one seemed to notice the little girl quietly carrying a burden that no child should ever have to bear. As the months passed, Regina became very careful about how she treated Imani. Whenever Elias was home, she acted like the perfect stepmother. She smiled, spoke softly, and even asked Imani if she wanted more food at dinner. But the moment Elias left for work, everything changed. Regina's smile disappeared, and her voice became cold. She handed Imani a long list of chores before school and another one after she came home. One evening, after spending hours cleaning the kitchen, Imani finally gathered the courage to speak to her father. "Dad, I can't finish my homework because I'm always cleaning," she said quietly. Before Elias could answer, Regina quickly stepped in with a sad expression. "Elias, I'm only teaching her discipline and responsibility," she said. "She's growing up. She needs to learn how to take care of a home. She always exaggerates when she doesn't want to do her chores." Elias looked at Imani and sighed. "Regina is trying her best," he said. "She's doing this because she cares about you. Please don't make things harder for her." Those words broke Imani's heart. She wanted to scream that none of it was true, but every time she tried to explain, Regina found a way to twist the story. If a plate was broken, Regina blamed Imani. If dinner was late, it was somehow Imani's fault. If the house wasn't spotless, Regina told Elias that Imani had been lazy all day. Slowly, Elias stopped asking questions. He believed what he saw whenever he was home: a calm, caring wife and a quiet daughter who rarely smiled anymore. He never saw the tears Imani wiped away after everyone went to bed or the sore hands she hid after hours of scrubbing floors and washing clothes. Even her teachers noticed she looked tired, but Imani was too afraid to tell anyone what was happening. She had already learned a painful lesson. Every time she spoke the truth, no one believed her. The house that was once filled with her mother's love no longer felt like a home. It felt like a place where her voice didn't matter. Surrounded by family, Imani had never felt so completely alone. The years passed quietly, but for Imani, every new day felt exactly the same. She grew older, but her life never became easier. While other teenagers worried about school, friends, or their future, Imani worried about whether she had finished all of Regina's chores before she came home. She learned to stay silent because every complaint only made things worse. Every morning, long before the sun came up, Imani was already awake. She quietly got out of bed, tied her hair back, and went straight to the kitchen. She prepared breakfast for everyone, packed lunches, washed the dishes, and made sure the house looked perfect before leaving for school. Most days, she didn't even have enough time to eat a proper breakfast herself. Meanwhile, her stepsister, Talia Bonda, lived a completely different life under the same roof. Talia slept until the last minute, wore new clothes, and spent her weekends shopping with friends or scrolling through her phone. Regina treated her like a princess. If Talia wanted something, she got it immediately. If she made a mess, Regina simply called for Imani to clean it up. After school, While her classmates laughed together and joined sports clubs or studied at the library, Imani rushed home. She swept every room, mopped the floors, washed clothes by hand, ironed uniforms, cleaned the bathrooms, and cooked dinner before anyone else arrived. By the time she finally opened her school books, it was already late at night. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, and sometimes she fell asleep over her homework with a pencil still in her hand. Even after doing all of that, Regina was never satisfied. "You are so lazy," she would say. "Look how slow you are." Those words hurt more than the work itself. Imani couldn't understand how someone who worked from sunrise until midnight could be called lazy. She started believing that maybe nothing she did would ever be good enough. The hardest part wasn't the endless chores. It was feeling invisible. Her father came home to a clean house, hot food, and neatly folded laundry, but he never asked who had done it all. Regina always took the credit, smiling proudly while Imani quietly cleared the dinner table. Little by little, Imani stopped expecting anyone to notice her sacrifices. She smiled less, spoke less, and cried only when everyone else was asleep. Deep inside, she still hoped that one day someone would finally see the truth hiding behind her silence. When Imani's 18th birthday finally arrived, she woke up with a small feeling of hope. She didn't expect expensive gifts or a big celebration. She only wished that, for once, someone would remember it was her special day. Maybe her father would wish her happy birthday before leaving for work. Maybe they would eat dinner together. Maybe, just for one day, she would be treated like a daughter instead of a servant. That morning Elias smiled and said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We'll celebrate tonight." Those simple words filled Imani's heart with hope. She spent the whole day at school thinking that maybe this birthday would be different. When she arrived home, she saw colorful balloons, flowers, and a beautifully decorated dining room. For a moment, she couldn't believe her eyes. She smiled, thinking her father had really planned something for her. Then Regina walked over holding a plain black apron. "Put this on," she said coldly. Imani looked confused. "Why?" "Because we have guests coming and someone has to serve the food. Don't just stand there." The little hope inside Imani disappeared in an instant. She quietly tied the apron around her waist and went into the kitchen. For the next few hours, she carried trays of food, poured drinks, washed dirty plates, and cleaned up after everyone. While the guests laughed and enjoyed themselves, the birthday girl stood in the background like she didn't belong. Not one person wished her a happy birthday because no one even knew it was her birthday. As she walked through the living room with another tray, one of the guests looked at her and smiled politely. "Oh," he asked Regina. "Is she the housemaid?" Regina didn't hesitate. She gave a small laugh and replied, "Almost." The room filled with quiet chuckles. Imani froze where she stood. Her hands began to shake, and for a second she thought she might drop the tray. She looked toward her father, hoping he would correct Regina or say something. But Elias was busy talking with another guest. He hadn't even heard the conversation. Tears filled Imani's eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't want anyone to see her cry. She quietly turned around, walked back into the kitchen, and closed the door behind her. The moment she was alone, she could no longer hold it in. Tears rolled down her face as she leaned against the counter, trying not to make a sound. It wasn't just another cruel comment. It was the moment she realized that, in Regina's eyes, she wasn't family at all. On the one day that should have reminded her she was loved, she was made to feel like she didn't belong in her own home. For years, everyone believed Regina's version of the story. They thought Imani was quiet because she was shy. They thought she worked around the house because she was learning responsibility. But there was one person who saw the truth from the very beginning. Mama Zawadi, Elias's mother, noticed every little change in her granddaughter. She saw the tired look in Imani's eyes, the rough skin on her small hands, and the way she flinched whenever Regina called her name. She also noticed something else. Whenever Elias came home, Regina suddenly became kind and gentle. It was like watching two completely different people. At first, Mama Zawadi tried talking to Elias, but he always defended his wife. "Mother," he would say, "you're misunderstanding Regina. She's only trying to raise Imani the right way." After hearing those words again and again, Mama Zawadi realized that simply telling the truth would never be enough. She would need proof. From that day on, she quietly started collecting evidence. Whenever she visited the house and saw Imani scrubbing floors while Talia relaxed on the couch, she took photos without anyone noticing. When Regina shouted cruel words at Imani while Elias was away, Mama Zawadi secretly recorded the conversations on her phone. She even saved text messages Regina had accidentally sent to the family group chat before quickly deleting them. Some of those messages clearly showed how differently she treated Talia and Imani. Month after month, the evidence grew. Photos, voice recordings, messages. Every file told the same heartbreaking story. None of it was taken to embarrass Regina. Mama Zawadi kept everything for one reason only: to protect the granddaughter who had no one else to protect her. One afternoon, Mama Zawadi found Imani quietly washing clothes outside. The young woman looked exhausted, but she still forced herself to smile. "You don't have to worry about me, Grandma," Imani said softly. "I'm used to it now." Those words broke Mama Zawadi's heart more than anything she had ever seen. "No, my child," she whispered, gently holding Imani's hands. "No one should ever get used to being treated this way." That night, Mama Zawadi sat alone in her living room and looked through every photo, every recording, and every message she had collected over the years. She realized she had waited long enough. If she stayed silent any longer, Imani would continue suffering. She closed the folder, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would change the entire family forever. The truth had been hidden for years. Now it was finally time for everyone, especially Elias, to see it with their own eyes. A week later, Elias returned home after a long business trip. He was tired but happy to finally be back with his family. As always, the house looked clean, dinner was ready, and Regina greeted him with a warm smile. Everything seemed normal. She hugged him, asked about his trip, and acted like the caring wife he believed she was. The next morning, Regina and Talia left for a shopping trip while Imani was at school. Elias stayed home because he wanted to rest before going back to work. While looking for an old family photo in the study, he noticed a small envelope on the desk with his name written on it. Inside was a flash drive and a short handwritten note from Mama Zawadi. It simply said, "Please listen before you judge. Your daughter needs you." Confused, Elias plugged the flash drive into his laptop. At first, he saw pictures of Imani washing clothes, scrubbing floors, carrying heavy buckets, and cleaning the house while Talia relaxed or watched television. His forehead tightened with worry. Regina had always told him the girls shared the chores equally. Then he clicked on one of the voice recordings. Regina's cold voice filled the room. "Move faster. You're not part of this family. You're here to work." Elias stopped breathing for a second. He quickly played another recording. "I don't care if you're tired. Finish cleaning before your father comes home." His hands began to shake. Then came the recording that shattered everything he believed. Regina laughed and said, "As long as he's away, she'll stay my maid." The room suddenly felt silent. Elias stared at the computer screen, unable to move. It was Regina's voice. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding, no excuse. The woman he had trusted for years had been lying to him the entire time. Memories rushed through his mind all at once. Every time Imani had tried to speak, every tear he had ignored, every moment he had told her to listen to Regina because he believed she was only teaching discipline. His heart sank with unbearable guilt. He realized his daughter had never been asking for attention. She had been begging for help. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at another photo of Imani, still wearing her school uniform while washing a pile of dishes bigger than herself. For the first time, he truly saw what had been happening inside his own home. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet. In that painful moment, Elias understood a heartbreaking truth. The greatest mistake of his life wasn't marrying Regina. It was failing to believe the daughter who had trusted him to protect her. That evening, Elias asked everyone to meet in the living room. His voice was calm, but there was something different about him. Regina noticed it immediately. Imani quietly walked in and stood near the door, while Talia sat on the sofa, confused about why everyone had been called together. A few minutes later, Mama Zawadi arrived as well. The room felt heavy with silence. Regina smiled as if nothing was wrong. "What is this about?" she asked. Elias looked straight into her eyes. "I want the truth," he said. "How have you been treating Imani while I was away?" For a moment, Regina looked surprised, but she quickly recovered. "What are you talking about?" she replied with a small laugh. "I've treated her like my own daughter. If she's complaining again, she's just trying to turn you against me." Then she pointed at Imani. "She's always been lazy. I only asked her to help around the house because I wanted her to become responsible." Imani lowered her head. She had heard those same words so many times that they no longer surprised her. But this time, Elias didn't defend Regina. Instead, he picked up the remote and turned on the television. "I think we should all watch something first," he said quietly. The first recording began to play. Regina's angry voice echoed through the room. "Finish cleaning before your father gets home." Another recording followed. "You're not family. You're here to work." The color slowly disappeared from Regina's face. Then the final recording played. She laughed and said, "As long as he's away, she'll stay my maid." The room fell completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Talia stared at the television with wide eyes. She looked at her mother, then at Imani, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. She had always thought Imani simply did the chores because she wanted to. She had never realized how cruel her own mother had been. Regina quickly stood up. "Those recordings are edited," she shouted. "Your mother is trying to destroy our family." But before anyone could answer, Elias placed several printed photographs on the coffee table. Each one showed Imani cleaning the house alone, washing piles of clothes, carrying heavy buckets, and working while Talia relaxed nearby. "There are also messages," Elias said, his voice breaking. "Years of lies. Years of proof." Regina looked from the photos to the recordings, searching for something. Anything to save herself. There was nothing. Every lie had been exposed. Every excuse had fallen apart. For years, she had controlled the story because Elias trusted her more than his own daughter. Now the truth was speaking for itself. Elias slowly turned toward Imani. Tears filled his eyes as he realized how much pain she had carried in silence. At that moment, Regina had nothing left to say. For the first time in years, everyone finally believed Imani. Later that night, after everyone had gone quiet, Elias slowly walked down the hallway toward Imani's room. His heart felt heavier with every step. For years, he had lived in the same house, yet he had never truly looked at the room where his daughter spent most of her life. He gently knocked on the door. "Imani, may I come in?" She quietly nodded. As Elias stepped inside, his heart broke. The room was small and almost empty. The bed was old and so narrow that it barely looked comfortable. The blanket had been stitched together in several places. A tiny wooden desk stood in the corner, covered with school books that had been repaired with tape because they were falling apart. Her school uniform had been washed so many times that its color had faded. Inside the closet hung only a few old clothes, carefully folded to make them last as long as possible. There were no birthday gifts, no family photos, no decorations, nothing that made the room feel like it belonged to a loved daughter. Elias slowly picked up one of her notebooks. Between the pages, he found unfinished homework, small grocery lists, and daily chore schedules written in Regina's handwriting. He couldn't believe that while other teenagers were enjoying their childhood, his daughter had been spending her days cleaning, cooking, and trying to survive. His hands began to shake. Tears rolled down his face as the painful truth settled into his heart. He hadn't just failed to notice her pain. He had unknowingly left her alone to face it. Imani stood quietly by the window, unsure of what to say. She had dreamed for years that her father would finally understand. Now that he did, neither of them could find the right words. Elias slowly walked toward her. With tears streaming down his face, he gently held her hands. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I was supposed to protect you, and I failed." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Years of pain, loneliness, and broken trust filled the silence between them. Imani's eyes filled with tears. More than anything, she had wanted to hear those words. But they also reminded her of everything she had lost. Elias wrapped his daughter in a hug, holding her tighter than ever before. "I can't change the past," he said through his tears. "But I promise you this. From today on, you will never have to face another day alone." For the first time since her mother passed away, Imani allowed herself to cry in her father's arms. Not because she was hurting, but because someone had finally seen the little girl who had been silently waiting to be saved all those years. The next morning everything changed. After the truth came out, Regina realized there was nothing left to hide. Elias made it clear that she could no longer stay in the house. She packed her bags in silence. For the first time in years, she had no excuses, no lies, and no one willing to believe her. Talia quietly left with her mother, still trying to understand everything that had happened. As the front door closed behind them, the house became strangely quiet. For Imani, the silence felt different. It wasn't the lonely silence she had lived with for years. It felt peaceful. She could finally breathe without worrying about being shouted at or called into the kitchen every few minutes. The days that followed were not easy. Years of pain could not disappear overnight. Imani still woke up before sunrise, expecting to hear Regina calling her name. Sometimes she apologized even when she had done nothing wrong because she had become so used to being blamed. Elias noticed these little habits, and each one reminded him of how deeply his daughter had been hurt. Instead of making empty promises, Elias started proving himself through his actions. Every morning he made breakfast for both of them. In the evenings they cooked dinner together, laughing over simple mistakes in the kitchen. He listened whenever Imani wanted to talk and never interrupted her. If she stayed quiet, he simply sat beside her, letting her know she didn't have to face anything alone anymore. A few months later, Imani received the letter she had dreamed about for years. She had been accepted into a university in Lilongwe to study architecture. When she opened the envelope, she couldn't stop smiling. It was the first time in a long time that her future felt brighter than her past. On her first day at university, Elias proudly drove her there himself. Before she got out of the car, he looked at her and smiled. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said softly. Those words brought tears to Imani's eyes, but this time they were tears of hope. University changed her life. She made new friends, worked hard, and slowly discovered the confident young woman she had buried beneath years of fear. She no longer saw herself as the girl who cleaned floors and stayed invisible. She began to believe in her own dreams. The relationship between father and daughter didn't heal in a single day. Trust had been broken for too many years. But with every honest conversation, every shared meal, and every small act of love, they moved a little closer. For the first time since losing her mother, Imani finally felt like she had a home again, not because the house had changed, but because the people inside it had. Years passed, and Imani's life changed in ways she had once thought were impossible. The little girl who had spent her childhood cleaning floors and washing dishes had become one of the most respected young architects in Lilongwe. Every building she designed reminded her that dreams could survive even the hardest childhood. She had worked for every success with courage, patience, and determination. One bright morning, family, friends, and colleagues gathered for the opening ceremony of a beautiful new family home designed by Imani herself. It wasn't just another project. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome. As she stood in front of the house, she looked at the smiling faces around her and remembered the frightened little girl who once believed she would never be enough. When it was Elias's turn to speak, he walked to the front with tears already in his eyes. He looked at the crowd, then proudly placed his hand on Imani's shoulder. "This is my daughter," he said with a smile full of pride. "She is the strongest person I have ever known. I almost lost the chance to know the amazing woman she would become, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for the second chance she gave me." The crowd applauded, but Imani wasn't thinking about the applause. She looked at her father and saw the man who had once failed her, but who had also chosen to face the truth, admit his mistakes, and fight every day to become the father she deserved. She smiled through happy tears. In that moment, she realized something that changed her forever. Her greatest victory had never been getting revenge on Regina. It wasn't becoming successful. It wasn't proving anyone wrong. Her greatest victory was finally knowing her own worth. She no longer needed someone else's approval to believe she mattered. The little girl who had once felt invisible had grown into a woman who could never be made to feel small again. As the ceremony ended, Elias hugged his daughter tightly, and this time there was no pain between them, only love, healing and hope for the future. Imani looked up at the sky, silently thanking her mother for the strength she had carried inside her all those years. And she knew at last she was truly free. Final line. My stepmother treated me like a maid for years, but the day my father learned the truth, he realized he hadn't just lost my childhood, he had almost lost his daughter forever.